share with you this week's Parshas Bahar, something very nice from the Rebbe's father, Rebbe Yitzchok Zatzal. The Rebbe's father has a beautiful diuk question in the wording of Rebbe Huda Anossi, who wrote the Mishnah, in Perik, the third Perik of Mesichte Eirchen. He changes his words over there, as we'll soon see, and Rebbe Yitzchok gives a beautiful explanation in connection to this week's Parsha. The Mishnah over there, the whole Perik, in Perik Gimel of Eirchen, speaks about the certain fines, payments a person has to give, and sometimes that payment is to your advantage, sometimes to your disadvantage. Sometimes it's lenient, and sometimes it's stringent. And the Mishnah gives five examples. Number one, the laws of Eirchen. If somebody says, this person's 30 years old, 35, I want to give the value of this person to the Beis HaMikdash a gift. The Chumash says in Parshas Bechukosei next week that he has to give 50 shekel kesef. 50 shekel. Now, it could be this person is worth $1 million. He's a diamond deal or whatever it should be. Still in all, you give 50. That's to your advantage. Sometimes to disadvantage. He's not even worth anything. Still in all, you have to pay 50. The next is the law of Sdei Achuza. Also next week's Parsha. Somebody inherits a field, and then he donates that field to the Beis HaMikdash. And then he wants to redeem it. He wants to have it back. He has to pay a certain amount, also 50 shekel, for every choymes oirim, an area where you can plant a certain measurement that it will produce barley. And in our calculation, it's approximately 4.5 acres of piece of land. For every 4.5 acres, you could redeem it for 50 shekel. Okay? If it could be to your advantage or disadvantage. It could be the field is worth $100,000 and you're only paying 50 shekel. That's to your advantage. It could be it's worth nothing. You still have to pay 50. Number three, if a man has an ox and he gored already 3 times, he made a damage. He's called a muad. Established problem with this ox. This ox gores. The Torah says in Parshas Mishpatim, a non-Jewish slave, he has to pay the owner 30 shekel kesef. Now again, if the slave is worth $1 million, you're still only paying 30. If he's worth nothing, you're still paying 30. Or whatever the amount is. 30. That's the third. And then the Torah speaks about in Parshas Kiseitze, if a person forced himself on a woman, or he seduced her, he has to pay 50 shekel to her. And if Mitzvah, he gave her a bad name for her, he was engaged to her, and he said not nice things about her behavior, he has to pay, we found out it's wrong, he has to pay 100 shekel. So we have these 5 things. Now in all these 5 things, there's a difference between Sdei Achuza, when you're redeeming the field for the Beis HaMikdash, and all the other 4. Eirchen, the value of a person, the value, the slave that you have to pay, about the woman, sometimes 50, sometimes 100. In the Torah, it always uses the lashon shekel kesef. Shekel is a biblical name. Shekel. Now, when the Jews left Israel, they started to have the currency of other nations. And the names changed, the Babylonian names. And a shekel is also called selah. Samach Lamed Ayin, selah. Now here comes Rebbe Yitzchok and asks, you have 5 things in the Mishnah. Eirchen, Sdei Achuza, Evet Knani, Oine Samafata, Moitze Shemra. By 4 of them, by Eirchen, by Evet, by Oine Samafata, by Moitze Shemra, the Mishnah uses the word selah. You have to pay the amount in the equivalence of selah. Only by Sdei Achuza does the Mishnah say, Rabbi Huda Anossi used the language, 50 shekel kesef. Why does he use the biblical language, shekel, by Sdei Achuza, by the land that you have to redeem for 50 shekel, and by all the other 4, he uses the Aramaic language, selah. Explained Rebbe Yitzchok so beautiful based on this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha says that the laws of Yovel only apply when all the Jews were in Israel. Approximately 150 years before the destruction of the first temple, there was a exile from the tribe of Reuven and Manasseh and Gad, 2.5 Shvatim. And from that moment on, the laws of Yovel did not apply, as the Gemara speaks about this in Mesichta Eirchin, Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Now we learned the Gemara. If you learn the Mishnahs, you'll see in the Parshas of Bechor Koisai, there's the law of Zdei Achuzah, where you give 50 shekel for every area of 4.5 acres approximately, only applies when the Yovel was in existence, was still in its custom, and when they acted upon and had the laws of Yovel. Once the laws of Yovel stopped, this law of 50 stopped. If you want to redeem it, you have to give the true value of the field, whatever it was. Comes Rabbi Yitzchok and says, if that's the case, that this law of Zdei Achuzah was only done by Yovel, with this, the Rabbi Nossi hinted in his words of the Mishnah. He uses the biblical language of shekel, because it says in this week's Parsha, Yovel it's a year of Jubilee, Kodesh Yilechem, it should be holy to you. The other 49 years, not Shemitah, but you worked in the field, that means you were involved in the mundane part of the world. The year of Yovel is Kodesh. You are elevated to a higher level of holiness, similar to Lashon Kodesh. Kodesh, Lashon Kodesh. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wanted to hint this law in one word. All the other ones, Eirchin and the Eved and the Yisum and Bafata and Mitzvah Shemra, they applied even after the Yovel wasn't in its custom, when they observed the laws of Yovel. But Zdei Achuzah was only when there was still the year when all the Jews were in Israel, and that the Yovel symbolizes a year of holiness, Kodesh, and therefore he wanted to hint this law. You know when the laws of Zdei Achuzah applies? When there is the Jubilee year, the Kodesh, and that's why he only picked the Lashon Kodesh language, the shekel, and not the Targum, which symbolizes already, as the Rebbe's father explains many places, the exile where Jews had other languages, but here he wanted to pick only when all the Jews were in Israel, the Kodesh, like symbolizing Yovel, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi changes his language, and only by Zdei Achuzah does he say the word Chamishim shekel, a biblical language, and not Selah like the other ones, the Targum language.